would you do this again, or what kind of regrets have you had along the way of acquiring 3 properties?
Welcome to Real Stories in Real Estate with your host, Denise Laframboise. Real people sharing real stories about their adventures in real estate.
So welcome to the Real Stories in Real Estate podcast, where we talk about wins and losses in real estate from real people, where they tell us what they've done, what they've learned. I'm your host, Denise Laframboise, and today I have Michael Durham with me. Morning, Michael.
Good morning, Denise.
Welcome. So we're going to talk a little bit about buying multiple properties today. So Michael, do you want to talk about, so how old were you when you bought your first property?
That's actually a good question. I think it was about 6 years ago. So 2015. I guess in my 20s, somewhere around there.
Amazing. And what did we do with that property?
So I purchased it and slowly renovated it up to how I wanted it. Took me a few years. And here we are today.
Right. And then, okay. So then do you want to share how did we buy your second property?
So the second property, after renovating this property that I live at currently, we refinanced it and used those funds to purchase the second property. And then as well, we had some money for some of the renovations at the next property.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize that we don't need to have money. If we have equity, we can use the equity in our homes to buy another property, right? That's how we got our second home too. At the time that we did it, you could actually refinance up to 95%. You can't do that anymore. Like you can only refinance to 80% these days. But you can always go all the way up. A lot of people sometimes will think, okay, well, at the bank, I only qualify for 65% or something. If we need to, especially with multiple properties, we can go up to 80% with a B lender instead. A lot of people get worried about that because it's a slightly higher interest rate. But as you can see, when your equity increases, sometimes it doesn't matter how much it costs you to get it.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I mean, I'm basically at a point where if I can get a house from using my house and leveraging the money from that house to get my next house and it's generating money, why not?
Right. Yeah. And then, okay. So then the second property, what did we do with that one?
So we made that into a legal duplex, went through the process with the city, which wasn't too bad. So we did our demolition prior to the city coming in. And started some of the installation, although I think it'd be safer to have the city come in before installation, just in case. And then once that was all installed, we got the permit, and now we've got a legal duplex with tenants upstairs and downstairs, and it's fully legal.
Was there anything about that process, about building the legal apartment, that you were surprised about?
Some of the requirements, I think, were a little bit above and beyond code that the inspector required, but they weren't too bad. So I kind of just followed what they said, wrote down everything they wanted, put it on the list, did it all, had them come back, repeated the process until we got the permit.
Yeah, it's funny. Some like different municipalities have different requirements, right? Like we've had apartments in Richmond Hill, Newmarket, Whitby, and Oshawa now, right? So every bylaw is a little bit different. Like with Whitby, you had to have laundry. You were required to have separate laundry, which was new. I mean, Newmarket, you had to have a whole separate heating source, which was interesting. With the Whitby one, we had to, right? With Whitby, we had to, we weren't allowed to have an entrance through our garage. So we actually had to drywall off a little hallway inside our garage with Type-X drywall to be able to have that as the entrance. So just, it's always interesting. And I find people are scared of the process sometimes, but the reality is the town wants you to have legal units and they will help you. Like I always feel like they're working with you, even though, yes, sometimes the things are expensive or silly that they want. Like I always appreciate that there's some value in them saying, okay, here's why, right? A lot of the times it's for safety reasons. Okay. And then, so we renovated that one. Do you remember, so how much you bought that one for and what it's worth today, like a year later?
I believe we purchased it for 450 and it appraised for 605. So
And that was about 2 months ago. Like, I bet you if we appraised it now, it would appraise for 700
yeah,
in today's market, right? Which is just crazy. And do you remember approximately how much those renos cost?
the rentals costed just below 100, so between 85 to 95,000 for upstairs and downstairs, because we wanted to make upstairs more comfortable for that tenant, and then downstairs the entire unit gutted and redone from start to finish. And then with what the inspector said, like some of the upgrades that I think were a little bit above code were double insulating between the upstairs and downstairs unit. But in the long run, if those units are not hearing each other between the ceilings, there's less complaints. I'm happier.
Yeah, and it's funny, in the house we're in, like it's a tribute builder house, and so we have the insulation, like the safe and sound insulation, and then the double layers of Type-X drywall for our legal apartment downstairs. You can't hear anything between the main floor and the downstairs, but the rest of the house, like, I wish it was soundproof because you can hear everybody walking. Like, it's such a better standard than what the builders build for just a single family home, right?
Yeah.
And then, so, and that one rents, like, it covers itself, right? Like, when you have a nicer apartment, you rent it for more money too.
Yeah. So I think renovating it, regardless whether it does not need it or could just use it, I think you're going to pull in better tenants, and then therefore be able to pull in a little bit better rent. And then obviously once you appraise it, your mortgage that you're going to owe is going to be a little bit higher, but as long as you're still cash flowing positive, and you can now purchase your next property and repeat the process, I think is.
And honestly, even if you're not cash flow positive, like if I said to you, you know what, you're going to make 150 grand on this house, like it's going to go up $150,000 in a year and a half, but it's going to cost you $200 a month. Like, wouldn't you do it anyways? Because I would.
I would still want to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just like that cash flow. Right.
Well, I mean, but you're always going to have potentially some vacancy once in a while. A tenant's going to leave, somebody else is going to come. Like, I mean, cash flow positive is great. And really the key to that for me is 2 units.
Yeah.
Right. A single unit, it may cash flow positive, but when it's vacant, you're waiting, right? Yeah. I also always found that 2 units, it kept the tenants accountable, I guess. Like we had a situation where a tenant was got an animal without telling us. Well, the other tenant ratted them out. Like keeping people honest or keeping people accountable is great, right?
Yeah. So like one part of that, so we own a landscaping company. So all of our rental properties, we're going to be plowing snow. We're going to be doing the lawn cutting maintenance. So our tenants kind of love that, but also make sure that we're there once a week, making sure that they're keeping it nice and clean, at least from the exterior.
Yeah.
Everything's upkept and it looks decent.
I would always go check the mail, right? Like I would always leave the mail, like the bills and stuff, to go to the rental properties so I could pick up the mail, stop by, just see what's going on, right? Because you don't know if extra people are moving into the house, if they've sublet it to somebody else. When we went to the landlord tenant board, we saw so many things, like so many stories about, people that had sublet to people that you didn't even know who they were living in your house. So crazy. So, that being an absentee landlord is not a great idea, right? Like you always either need to be checking on it or have hired a property manager or somebody to check on it for you. So let's talk about, so then that property, we renovated it, refinanced it, and then
purchase another property.
And so you now own 3 properties and are how old?
I am, oh my goodness, that's not a question for me to answer. It takes me a while to do the math. I think I'm 28 turning 29 this year.
It's amazing. Yeah. And so what that does for your net worth is huge. Right. And I think for just safety, right? If anything happens, if you're affected by the pandemic, I used to say to Gabe, well, we can always sell a house, like pick a house, we can sell one. If we're ever in trouble, if we ever needed money, and as a self-employed person, a home is a great pension plan.
I like it. It's my retirement.
Right. Tell me about the business a little bit.
So the landscaping business.
Yeah.
So we've been operating for just over 7 years. So we provide property maintenance services for commercial and residential customers, from lawn cutting, snow plowing, and services in between. And then we also have a landscaping division that takes care of soft landscaping. And we service Durham region and just outside of that.
Awesome. Okay. So my other question was around, like, would you do this again, or what kind of regrets have you had along the way of acquiring 3 properties?
So I would have definitely done it again. I would have probably pushed a little bit more to do it earlier. I like to go through the process myself. So I did a lot of the work myself in my first house. So to kind of understand what's all involved. And then being that I own a company, I kind of understand where contractors are coming in with the prices and how they work stuff out. So I think it's more understanding as much knowledge as possible to make sure, okay, yes, this is the best idea. I'm very analytical, so I like to look at it from multiple perspectives, if that makes sense.
Yep. And do you want to talk about the third one, about what we ran into with that one?
Yep. So we purchased our third house in Oshawa. The goal was to make it a legal duplex, which we weren't able to based off of where it's located. The city was requiring. So we're likely going to be renovating it and selling it, just dependent upon me jumping off the fence with one of my decisions about what I'll be doing with that.
Right. And so why couldn't we build a basement apartment there?
So there's CLOCA that they basically required an approval from them. So the city of Oshawa, they didn't get the approval, obviously.
Because it's in the floodplain. So it's near a body of water that it's attributed to a floodplain, which I believe the reason why the basement apartment, why they can't allow that is because it's a certain density, right, of homes. So they don't want to allow extra units, extra parking, extra people, and so on. We see it a lot more like with cottages and stuff, that things will be in a floodplain of a lake. And to our surprise, it's a river in Whitby, right? Or in Whitby, in Oshawa. It's not even like the lake.
Yeah, no. And I didn't even think anything of it. I knew the river was there only because we serviced the property across the street the year prior. So I knew about the neighborhood and whatnot, but there's nothing really to me that says, hey, look into this, until, I have it.
Well, and it seemed like even the city and the designers didn't really know, right? Everybody was proceeding as normal, the same way you did on the house before that.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, by the way, you can't do this anymore.
That's okay. We'll figure it.
Yeah, but it's just interesting, some of the stuff you run into, right? Like those unique challenges, like with the Newmarket house, when they're like, well, you have to put in a second furnace or baseboard heating. I'm like, this really? Like, that's what you expect? Like, how are people ever supposed to build an apartment? Just very interesting, what the expectations are and how the rules change, right?
From city to city.
Well, especially when I think probably the worst apartment we ever had was the first one we owned, and it was legal status when we bought it because it was so old, right? Because it's a 1950s bungalow that had been an apartment since, I don't know, the 60s. So it was probably the unsafest one we had. There was a bedroom that didn't have a window, and somehow that was okay, which is crazy to me, right? But it was grandfathered status. So it's always interesting to me what is required. So yeah, so thank you so much for sharing. If people want to know more about your landscaping and snow removal services, which are amazing, or about, acquiring 3 properties before they're 30, which I think is awesome. Like, I think you're killing it. I'm excited to see you get number 4 and number 5. Right. We'll just keep going as much as we can. So if they have any questions about any of that stuff, how do they get a hold of you?
So the best way is through our website, michaeldurhamlandscaping.com, or our phone number, 289-928-8206.
Awesome. So thank you for being here today. So I'm your host, Denise Laframboise, and this was Real Stories in Real Estate. We're talking to Michael Durham about how he obtained properties, got them cash flow positive, and then continued to use them to buy more. So we'll keep going and see how many he acquires. Maybe he'll be back on with 10 properties in a few years. This is the podcast can be found on my website, www.deniselaframboise.ca, or Spotify, Apple, Audible, iTunes, anywhere that you find your podcasts. So thank you very much. Have a great day.